And third thing, which is most important, which is like I don't want these AI models to suck the fun out of programming, because even though I've made like 10 different things over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I don't actually feel so satisfied with myself, and I actually feel a little unsatisfied, to be honest. So about a month ago, I started using Cursor AI for the first time. Before that, I knew that it existed, I just never actually got my hands around it. For those of you who don't know, Cursor AI is a IDE that is based on top of VS Code. You can use that in your daily coding needs. The major difference between VS Code and Cursor is that Cursor is completely AI based, so it has its unique features like chat, it has Composer, Bug Finder. I never actually tried Bug Finder, but Composer is really cool. Composer gives Cursor the power to sort of create files, run commands, and iterate over a solution for a problem. So that's Cursor for you. I got introduced to Cursor about a month ago, and then I started using it for pretty much everything. I completely shifted from VS Code to Cursor, and I started coding in Cursor full time. At first, it did took me like a few days to get used to of this new environment that I was working in, where the agent will work side by side with me. And over the next 1 2 weeks, as I spent more time using Cursor, I figured out how to make the most out of it, and I figured out how to actually use this Cursor Composer feature along with myself so that I can do a lot more than I can do generally otherwise. And it was really great. In just about a span of 3 to 4 weeks, I was able to do like a lot of things. I revamped the entire UI of my digital garden. I added a like button to my blogs. I figured out how to use Qwen 14 billion model locally. I figured out how to use stable diffusion locally. I made the stupid trip planner project. I made a Spotify Reels kind of a project. I also wrote custom APIs to do inference on Qwen and stable diffusion that were running on my local machine. So that's like a lot of things. I did a lot of things in just a span of 3 to 4 weeks outside of my daily work at Adobe. I was able to do all of these things thanks to Cursor, thanks to Composer. So that was a lot of fun. However, in the last few days, I ran into an issue. The issue basically was that I was trying to do too many things using Composer, and I didn't realize that in the last 4 weeks I've done so much that I actually got too dependent on Cursor at one point. I got so dependent that I would not fix or write any code. For most of the small projects, I would just ask Cursor to do things the way I wanted them to be done. There is nothing wrong in that, just an FYI. There's nothing wrong in what I was trying to do. It's just that I got over dependent on Cursor. And what happened then is that I was working on this big project where I was trying to create like a local chat GPT that would run on my machine on my MacBook. So I used Cursor to figure out how to inference those big Qwen models. Then I also figured out how to make an API for that. I figured out how to make a front end for that. And then at some point, there was one small bug that Cursor couldn't figure out how to fix. I kept trying, I kept iterating back and forth, but at that point, the code base was so big that Cursor would just not figure out how to fix that small bug. Now I can go and fix that bug myself, but in this case, I did not write any code. Like 100% of the code was written by Cursor, so I had absolutely no fucking idea as to how these things are working. I mean, I did have like a high level overview, but in depth, I really did not know how things were working. And even bigger problem was that since I was using Cursor and Cursor does things in its own ways, it actually created just one single HTML file and put like thousands of lines of code in that file, and then it becomes very hard to reason about it. So basically I ran into this issue and I couldn't figure out how to make Cursor solve this issue, and I could not fix it myself, and that basically meant my entire time was wasted because now this project cannot go any further. I cannot fix that bug myself because doing that would mean I'd have to go through and read thousands of lines of code that was written in a single file by an AI. Not fun. I absolutely would not want to do that. Instead, I can just go and create a new project myself. I find that so much easier. The second thing is that Cursor cannot figure that out itself because the project size is so big now, and Cursor starts hallucinating after a point. And that's when I realized that AI is taking the fun out of my programming stuff. And I am being too dependent on Cursor, too dependent on Cloud for stuff that I should be doing myself. I was too dependent and I was too ignorant of the fact that I wasn't even, reading the changes that it was doing in the files. I was just hitting accept. This could have been so much better. I should have tried to review the code before accepting the code. I should have asked Cursor to write more modular code. I should have asked Cursor to split the code into different files and folders. because it can do all of that. It's just that I did not ask it to do that because I got carried away, and that is something that can happen to you also. Now I don't know if you have access to Cursor or not. If you don't have access to Cursor, that's absolutely fine. You can use this other code editor called Tray AI, which is made by ByteDance, which is a parent company of TikTok. So it's a Chinese code editor, but if you don't have money to pay for Cursor, you can use Tray. It has exactly all the same features of Cursor. It is also based on VS Code. I actually kind of like its UI more than Cursor's, so that's a plus point. Feel free to try that out if you want. But now I can probably talk about some of the things that I would change in my workflow of using Cursor. So here's what I would do now. Number one, the first thing that I would do is basically that I would not accept a file that was written by Cursor or any code editor or any AI model without actually going through it line by line myself. Because if I don't do that right then and there, I wouldn't even realize when it will become like thousands of lines of code and I have no fucking idea as to how everything is connected. And so I'm never going to accept a file without reviewing it. The second thing that I'm going to do with Cursor going forward is that I will try to use it in places where things seem very repetitive or dumb to do. So for example, adding a like button is kind of dumb and stupid. I mean, it's very easy. I know how to do that, and I know that Cursor wouldn't like come up with something that I can't understand. So in those cases, I would definitely use Cursor. But in other cases where it's trying to do stuff that I don't really know how should be done, I would not let Cursor do that itself. For cases where I don't really know how to do a certain thing, I would ask its guidance and do that myself. Because A, I would learn a new thing, and B, if at any point I run into a bug, I can solve that myself. I wouldn't have to be 100% dependent on Cursor, and I don't have to give up on projects just because Cursor couldn't figure it out. And third thing, which is most important, which is like I don't want these AI models to suck the fun out of programming, because even though I've made like 10 different things over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I don't actually feel so satisfied with myself, and I actually feel a little unsatisfied, to be honest. The satisfaction that I get when I write 100% of code and create something myself, that can't be compared with what I felt when I was working with Cursor. It's good, it's great, it's very productive. But once a while, I want to make projects without using Cursor. I want to make projects without using Claude. I want to make projects without using ChatGPT, because that would really make me feel satisfied. But these things, all these AI models, all these AI tools, sometimes they leave you feel very unsatisfied even though you have done shit ton amount of work. I guess that's a lesson for everybody to learn. It's not about quantity, it's about having fun, it's about quality of work, it's about quality of time, it's about the difficulties that you face when you're writing code without using AI. I remember when people did not have access to internet like we do right now, people would write code without using internet. And that was a big thing. Like when internet came into existence, I know a lot of people like legendary coders who would be like, hey, I sometimes I just don't use internet and try to code without using internet because that gives me another level of satisfaction. And I realized that we've run into this problem where internet is basically these AI models for us. So now when you don't use these AI models and use internet, you feel the same level of satisfaction, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, that was just a quick summary of what happened between me and Cursor last weekend. But that being said, I will continue using Cursor. I'm just gonna change my ways around it, and it's extremely productive and it's extremely fun to use, but in limits only. Okay, I'm gonna see you soon in the next video. Bye bye.